In this episode, we are focusing on a part of support work that every beginner needs right away, because people do not only remember whether their problem was fixed, they also remember how they were treated while the problem was happening. A customer may be stressed, embarrassed, angry, confused, or worried about lost work, and the technician has to deal with that human side of the problem while also working through the technical side. That is why communication matters so much in support. Good communication helps the customer feel heard, helps the technician gather better information, and helps the whole situation stay calmer even when the fix is not quick or easy. Poor communication does the opposite. It makes simple problems feel worse, turns delays into frustration, and can damage trust even when the technical repair is correct. For beginners, this topic is important because strong communication is not extra polish added after technical skill. It is part of doing the job well from the start. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good place to begin is with the idea that the customer usually does not see the problem the way the technician sees it. The technician may think in terms of symptoms, devices, accounts, or possible causes. The customer usually thinks in terms of what got interrupted, what was lost, what is not working, and how that affects the rest of the day. A printer problem is not just a printer problem if someone needs to hand in paperwork within the hour. A password issue is not just a password issue if someone is locked out of an important meeting or cannot reach a customer. Beginners need to remember this because it explains why some users sound more emotional than the issue seems to deserve. They are reacting to impact, not to the technical label. When a technician understands that, communication improves right away. The goal is not to agree that every problem is a disaster. The goal is to understand why it feels serious to the person asking for help and to respond in a way that shows respect. Listening is one of the most important communication skills in support, and it is often harder than it sounds. Many new technicians listen only long enough to spot what they think is the answer, and then they rush toward that answer before the customer has finished explaining the problem. That creates two risks at once. First, the technician may miss an important detail that changes the whole picture. Second, the customer may feel brushed aside and become less cooperative, even if the technician is technically capable. Good listening means paying attention to what happened, when it started, what changed, what the customer already tried, and how the issue affects the work that needs to be done. It also means noticing what is still unclear instead of pretending the problem is already understood. A customer may use the wrong words for the technology involved, but that does not mean the customer has no useful information. Careful listening helps the technician collect facts, reduce wrong assumptions, and build trust before any real troubleshooting even begins. Part of good listening is asking better questions. Beginners sometimes ask vague questions like what happened or what is wrong, and then get frustrated when the answer is vague too. Strong support communication uses simple, clear questions that guide the customer toward useful information without sounding cold or mechanical. Asking what the customer was trying to do, what message appeared, whether the issue affects one system or many, or whether the problem happens every time can reveal far more than broad questions alone. The tone matters here too. A customer should feel helped, not interrogated. That means the technician should ask one clear question at a time and explain why the question matters when needed. It also helps to avoid loading too many technical terms into the question, because that can make the customer feel lost or defensive. When questions are clear and patient, the customer is more likely to provide details that help the repair. Good questions are not a sign that the technician does not know enough. They are a sign that the technician is working carefully. Another big part of professional communication is setting expectations early. Customers usually handle delays better when they understand what is happening and what comes next. Problems become more frustrating when the customer feels left in the dark, does not know how long things may take, and has no idea whether anyone is still working on the issue. Beginners sometimes avoid setting expectations because they are afraid of being wrong, but silence usually creates more trouble than a careful update. A technician can say that the issue needs to be checked, that a few steps need to happen first, or that an update will be given after the next review point. The key is to be honest and specific enough to reduce uncertainty without making promises that cannot be kept. It is much better to say that more time is needed than to give a quick answer that later turns out to be false. Clear expectations lower stress, reduce repeated follow-up questions, and make the customer feel like the problem is being managed instead of ignored. Professional communication also means speaking in plain language. Support work is full of technical terms, but most customers are not helped by hearing a stream of specialized words they do not use in daily life. A technician may understand the exact name of the service, the component, or the network path involved, but the customer mainly needs to understand what is wrong in practical terms and what is being done about it. That does not mean talking down to people. It means choosing words that are easier to follow and more useful in the moment. Instead of explaining everything in deep technical detail, a technician can explain that the device is not reaching the service it needs, that a setting may be incorrect, or that a shared system appears to be unavailable for the moment. Plain language keeps the conversation moving. It also lowers embarrassment for customers who may already feel uncomfortable asking for help. Clear communication is often a sign of deeper understanding, because people who truly understand a problem can usually explain it simply. Avoiding jargon is especially important when the technician is under pressure. Stress can make people fall back on habits, and one common habit is to speak in shorthand that makes sense only inside the support team. A beginner might say something like the user profile may be corrupted, the ticket will be escalated, or the endpoint is not authenticating correctly without realizing that the customer may not know what any of that means. When that happens, the customer may stop asking questions just to avoid feeling confused, and that can hide whether the explanation was useful at all. A better approach is to translate technical ideas into direct language the customer can act on or at least understand. The account may need repair. The issue needs to be sent to a more specialized team. The device is having trouble proving it has permission to connect. The details may still be technical underneath, but the explanation becomes more human. Support communication works best when the technician remembers that sounding knowledgeable is not the same as being helpful. Tone matters just as much as word choice. A technician can say the right thing in a way that still sounds impatient, dismissive, or scripted. Customers notice tone quickly, especially when they are already upset. A flat or rushed voice can make even a correct explanation sound like a brush-off. On the other hand, a calm and steady tone can lower tension before the actual solution is even found. This does not mean the technician has to sound overly cheerful or fake. It means sounding present, respectful, and interested in solving the problem. A simple habit like pausing before answering, acknowledging the customer's concern, and speaking at a steady pace can make a big difference. Tone also shows up in written messages, where short replies can seem harsher than intended. A beginner should learn to read messages back mentally before sending them. The goal is not to sound formal all the time. The goal is to sound like a professional who is taking the issue seriously and treating the other person with basic respect. Staying professional under pressure is one of the hardest parts of support work because the technician is not always dealing with calm, patient, and grateful people. Some customers interrupt, repeat themselves, blame the support team, or demand answers before the technician has enough facts. In those moments, the technician has to manage personal reaction as carefully as technical work. A defensive tone, sarcastic reply, or visible frustration can make the situation much worse very quickly. Professional communication means staying focused on the problem even when the customer is upset. That may involve slowing the pace, restating what is known, and guiding the conversation back to the next useful step. It also means not taking every harsh word as a personal attack. Sometimes the customer is reacting to fear, delay, or business pressure rather than to the technician as a person. Beginners should understand that staying calm is not weakness. It is one of the most useful ways to keep control of the situation and keep the path to resolution open. At the same time, being professional does not mean sounding robotic. Customers can tell when they are hearing memorized phrases instead of real attention. Saying the correct support words in the wrong way can feel just as unhelpful as saying the wrong words. A robotic answer often sounds stiff, generic, and disconnected from the actual problem. For example, repeating a standard apology over and over without showing any real understanding does not build trust. A better approach is to sound human while still staying professional. That means using natural language, referring to the actual issue, and showing that the technician understands what the customer is dealing with. A simple statement that connects to the real impact is often more helpful than a long formal script. The goal is not to become casual in a careless way. The goal is to speak like a real person who is paying attention. Customers usually respond better when they feel they are dealing with someone who understands the problem, not someone reading from a wall poster. Written communication needs the same care as spoken communication, and in some support settings it matters even more because messages become part of the record. Emails, chat messages, ticket updates, and handoff notes should be clear, respectful, and easy to follow. Beginners sometimes write too little because they are busy, and that leaves the customer unsure about progress. Others write too much in a way that buries the useful point under extra detail. Strong written communication states what is known, what has been done, what comes next, and whether the customer needs to do anything. It should avoid slang, blame, and emotional wording. It should also avoid making the customer decode internal team language. If the problem is delayed because another group must step in, say that clearly. If a restart will be needed later, say that clearly. If an update will follow after testing, say that clearly. Good writing saves time because it reduces confusion. It also helps the next technician understand the situation if the issue has to be handed off. Another important communication habit is knowing how to handle mistakes. Sometimes the technician misunderstands the issue, asks the wrong question, gives an update that turns out to be incomplete, or follows a path that does not fix the problem. When that happens, the best response is usually direct and calm. Trying to hide the mistake or speak around it often damages trust more than the mistake itself. A professional technician can admit that the first step did not solve the issue, explain what is understood now, and move the work forward without becoming defensive. Customers usually care more about honest progress than about perfect performance. This is also true when the technician does not know the answer yet. Saying that more review is needed is better than pretending to know something that has not been confirmed. Beginners sometimes think confidence means always sounding certain, but in support work, false certainty is dangerous. Real professionalism is being honest about what is known, what is not yet known, and what will happen next. Communication quality also affects teamwork, even when the customer sees only part of it. A technician who communicates clearly with coworkers usually gives better updates to customers too, because the thinking is more organized. If an issue must be handed off, the next person should understand the problem, the impact, what has already been tried, and what the customer has been told. Poor handoffs lead to repeated questions, repeated steps, and frustrated users who feel like they are starting over from the beginning. That is one reason customers often judge the whole support experience, not just one conversation. If one technician sounds helpful, but the next one has no idea what happened, the customer still experiences the service as confusing. Beginners should understand that customer communication is connected to internal communication. A team that shares information clearly is more likely to sound coordinated, trustworthy, and professional. A team that communicates poorly behind the scenes usually creates a rough customer experience, no matter how polite individual technicians may be. It also helps to remember that customers do not all communicate the same way. Some speak quickly and emotionally. Some are quiet and give very short answers. Some want a lot of explanation, while others want only the next useful action. A good technician pays attention to these differences without changing the level of professionalism. The answer is not to mirror every emotion or copy every style. The answer is to adjust the communication enough that the customer can follow it and feel supported. A person who is anxious may need reassurance that the issue is being handled. A person who is in a hurry may need short, direct updates. A person who is confused may need the explanation broken into smaller pieces. This flexibility is part of sounding human rather than robotic. It shows that the technician is not using one can style for every problem. Beginners do not need to become expert communicators overnight, but they should start noticing how different people react and how small changes in approach can improve the conversation. A simple example shows how much communication changes the support experience. Imagine a customer calls because a laptop will not connect to the wireless network before an important meeting. One technician says almost nothing, asks rushed questions, uses technical terms the customer does not understand, and ends with a vague statement that the problem is being checked. Even if that technician fixes the issue later, the customer will probably remember the experience as stressful and confusing. Now imagine another technician who listens first, asks simple questions, explains that the device is having trouble joining the network, states that a few checks are needed, and gives a clear update on what will happen next. The technical problem may be exactly the same in both cases, but the user experience is completely different. That is the real lesson here. Communication does not replace technical skill, but it changes how the customer experiences every part of the repair. Good communication can steady a hard situation. Poor communication can make even a small problem feel much bigger. By the end of this topic, the main idea to keep in mind is that support communication is not about sounding polished for its own sake. It is about helping people through a problem in a way that is clear, calm, and respectful. Listening helps the technician understand the real issue. Good questions bring out useful details. Plain language helps the customer follow what is happening. Clear expectations reduce frustration during delays. A steady tone keeps pressure from taking over the conversation. Professionalism protects the relationship even when the customer is upset. And sounding human keeps the interaction from feeling cold or scripted. For beginners, this matters because technical support is always part technical and part human. The fix matters, but so does the experience of getting to that fix. When you communicate well under pressure, you make the work easier for yourself, easier for the customer, and easier for the whole team that may need to help next.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.